Welcome to Yin Yoga. So this is a deep stretch class. You won't sweat. It's a cooling class. It's a really nice way to open up the body. It's great too if you haven't, if you're not sweaty or hot right now. It's a good way to come into your practice. Not a big deal if you did just do something though. Okay, so today you'll want a bolster or something like it. So this is a bolster. If you don't have one, two folded blankets or towels stacked on top of one another. This is one. So if you just took two, that's a great way to substitute it. And it's about this shape. Also, like a king size pillow could work, or some of us have cushions on the couch that are about the right size. Doesn't have to be exact, just something similar to this shape that's cush. It's like a big pillow. Okay, so you'll put the bolster or whatever you're using out in front of you the wide way. If you're using a mat, toward the top of the mat, and you'll bring the feet up onto the bolster, come down onto your back and rest the head down. So you can widen the feet here. The bolster's there to offer support. So don't feel like you have to keep the feet narrow. Let the toes turn out the way they naturally want to. So you're not holding the legs in place. And you might need to shift a little bit to get the shoulder blades underneath you, arms down by the sides. So it's like Shavasana with the feet elevated. And you'll close the eyes so you can start to come into your practice, taking a deep breath in through the nose, softly out through the mouth. Inhale in through the nose, fill up. Exhale back out through the mouth. Last one like that. Inhale in through the nose. And exhale back out through the mouth. This time in through the nose. Slowly back out through the nose. Keep going on your own. Ujjayi breath in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. Feeling this wave of relaxation start to wash over you with the feet elevated, being on your back, focusing on your breath, which helps start to push other thoughts and swirl in the mind away, even though they'll keep creeping back in. We practice not getting involved with them, not diving deep into any thought. And if that starts to happen, then we focus on our breath even more, giving the mind something to do. Unclench the jaw, soften the face. Then you'll take the bolster or whatever you're using, put it between the feet, see if you can grab onto it and bring it in toward the body. We want it underneath the knees this time, and we want to move as little as possible. So grabbing the outer edges, bringing it in closer, and then extending the legs again so that the knees are elevated. Arms are, everything else stays the same. But now the feet, the heels are resting down on the mat. Knees are lifted, and the hips become a little bit heavier with the shape of the legs. And now you're just observing the difference. How do you feel? What's the difference in the way you feel between having the feet elevated or the knees elevated? Is one more comfortable? Is one more relaxing? Or maybe you like them both the same amount. Keep the breath going. Sometimes the body just takes over and goes back to breathing on its own. And this time, bring the soles of the feet to the mat. Can you scoot the bolster all the way in against the hips? So hips are still down on the mat, but now you've moved the bolster all the way up against the hips. So the soles of the feet are completely on the mat. And this time you'll reach down, grab the bolster, press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide the bolster. So now it's underneath the hips. Set the bolster or set the hips back down onto the bolster. Soles of the feet stay on the mat. And now you have the hips elevated, head still down on the mat. You'll feel a lift in the chest. So now you're in more of a back bend than you were before. And this starts to bring a little bit more energy into the body. So with the soles of the feet on the mat, we'll hug the right knee in toward the chest. So you can either grab onto the top of the shin. If that bothers the knee, you can grab onto the back of the thigh. That works too. And you're keeping the sole of the left foot on the mat for now. Just so we can feel, there's no need to rush. You want to feel this in stages. If you'd like, you could extend that left leg forward. So you're lengthening it away from you, heels resting down on the mat. Leg can be fairly relaxed, that left leg. You're still bringing the right knee in. If this bothers you at all at any point, just bring the sole of the left foot back to the mat. You're still in a similar shape, getting into that right hip, staying in the back bend shape. And you'll start to bring the sole of the left foot back to the mat. Bring the right foot down to the mat. Hug the left knee in toward the chest. Stay here with the right foot down on the mat, hanging onto the top of the shin or back of the thigh, whichever one feels better. Trying to keep the chest lifted. So you feel that natural arch in the back. It's not rounding. Now you can consider stretching that right leg out in front of you, keeping the heel down on the mat so it's resting, it's not lifted. Remembering you can always bring that right foot back in whenever you want to. And you'll bring the sole of the right foot back to the mat. Set the left foot down to the mat, arms down by the sides. You're back in supported bridge. You're welcome to stay here. You could extend both legs out in front of you. See how that feels. Heels are still down on the mat. Maybe the chest lifts up a little bit more. Head still down on the mat. Trying to stay with your breath. Start to walk the feet back in. So soles of the feet are on the mat, back in supported bridge pose. Press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide the bolster out from underneath you, setting the hips back down onto the mat. And you'll just feel the difference in height. You were there for several minutes. Once you're there longer, the height difference feels bigger, more significant. If you're there for a shorter time, it wouldn't have felt as high. Okay, roll over to your right side. Use the left hand to bring yourself up. And this time you'll move the bolster behind you the wide way. Just make sure if you're using a mat, there's still some mat left. So you just want to bring it back like a third of the way from the back of the mat. Then you'll turn around. Hips are down on the mat, so are the feet. So legs are bent. You'll start to lie back onto the bolster. And where you want the bolster to be is underneath the center of the chest. Arms come down to the ground ahead of the bolster, heads resting on the ground or the mat. Arms can come out in a T shape. You could also cactus the arms, so bend at the elbows. This gives you a deeper shoulder opening. See if this is something that works in your body. If it's too intense, then just bring the arms out wide in a T shape. And for some of us, this can be too big of a back bend. If that's the case, skip it. You don't have to have the bolster underneath you. You can go back to supported bridge if you want to stay in a back bend. And if you feel like you don't quite have it in the right spot, then you definitely want to come back up and try again. So goal is to make sure the arms are down on the ground ahead of the bolster, heads down. And it's not the bolster's away from the lower back. So the lower back is free, hips are down on the mat. Soles of the feet still on the mat for now, knees bent. So we know when we extend the legs, it makes the back bend deeper, and we just take our time in yin, always staying away from our edge. If you'd like, you could play with extending the legs out in front of you. Try it. If it feels good, you can stay there. You'll get more lift in the chest. If it becomes too much, then just bring the feet back in. Let's start to walk the feet back in if the legs were extended out in front of you. Soles of the feet on the mat, knees are bent, pointing up. Feeling the difference in the height of the chest with the feet down on the mat. And you'll start to roll over to your right side again. Use that left hand to bring yourself up enough so you can slide the bolster out from underneath you, come back down onto your back. So lie down flat without any props, soles of the feet to the mat. And now you'll start to feel all the work we did with those back bends. Feet can stay down on the mat, or you could extend the legs out in front of you. And you can also feel the change of just lying down flat. We moved the bolster. We started at the feet and then worked our way up the spine, up the whole body. Then we went underneath the knees, the hips, and the center of the back. And you'll start to walk the feet in. So soles of the feet to the mat. Bring the knees in toward the chest, not as tight as you can go, just enough so you can grab onto the knees, hook the feet, one foot on top of the other, and you can start to rock side to side. And this is a nice way to counter a back bend. Hook the feet the other way. Rocking side to side is optional. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. So you'll just have to see what's working for you. Bring the feet back down to the mat, roll over to your right side, use the hands to bring yourself up. So you're on your right hip, take the bolster the long way behind you, and you want the bolster to come all the way up against that right hip. Then bring the hands down to each side of the bolster so the spine's long. Knees are bent, lengthen the chest forward, start to come down onto the bolster. And once before you bring the head down, look to the right, see if you can set the left side of the head down onto the bolster comfortably. Elbows can just flare out, rest down on the mat. If it doesn't feel good on the neck to have the head turned all the way around, then you lift it and you turn it the other way and rest that way. Either way, you have a twist happening in the spine, which is the ultimate goal. It just depends on how far up the spine you want to go. If you've had a night with awkward sleep where you wake up with a crick in the neck, this isn't the best thing to do. So you want a healthy neck coming into this. You'll feel how the bolster does all the work. It holds you in the twist, allowing you to rest in the pose. If you have the head turned all the way around, lift it, turn it so that the right side of the head rests on the bolster. You just feel that release on the neck, the difference in the top part of the spine. You'll start to walk the hands in. So they're on the mat. Press yourself away from the bolster, lifting the head and the chest. Turn around to face away from the bolster and come to a cross-legged seat. So you're just seated on the mat, even on the sit bones. Hands are on the knees, and you'll do a gentle seated cat-cow. So round the spine, chin goes in toward the chest. Doesn't have to be this biggest rounding. And then inhale, lift up, chest goes up, maybe the gaze goes up, and exhale round. So real slow, trying to feel the whole length of the spine as you round, and then inhale, lift, arch the spine, not as deep as you can go. Let's do one more slow cycle like that. Exhale, round the spine. Inhale, lift. Back to a neutral spine. Bring the soles of the feet to the mat. Bring both knees over to the left. So you're sitting on that left hip, and then bring the hands on each side of the bolster. So knees are bent, legs are relaxed, hands on each side of the bolster. Start to walk the hands forward until you can lie the torso down on the bolster. And then once you get the head close, look to the left. See if you can easily bring the right side of the head down onto the bolster and find a restful position. You know, if that's not working for you, you lift the head and you turn it the other way so the nose and the knees go in the same direction. And that can happen at any point in the pose. If you have the head turned all the way around, lift the head up, turn it so the left side of the head is resting down on the torso. Rest here. Begin to walk the hands in, lifting the head up, then the torso. Then you'll take the bolster, just set it off to the side of the mat. Turn around to face forward. Bolster's on the side of the mat just so it's within reach. You won't use it for this next shape. So you'll come forward to hands and knees, tabletop. And once you come to hands and knees, keep the hands down on the mat, shoulders stacked over the wrists, hips over the knees. Let's turn the hands. So turn the hands so that the fingertips point toward the sides of the mat. So like a seal. Then on the inhale, reach the heart forward, lift the tail. And on the exhale, round the whole spine, chin in toward the chest. So cat-cow, but we've changed the hands. Inhale, reach the heart forward. Exhale, round. Keep going. Inhale, reach the heart forward. You can go at your own pace. Exhale, round. One more cycle like this. Then you'll come back to center. This time we'll turn the hands the opposite way. So come onto the back of the hand, fingertips point toward the center of the mat. You can also shift back so you're not putting as much weight onto the wrist. If you can get the other hand to do the same thing, fingertips are pointing toward one another, fingers are spread. And then it's up to you how far forward you shift forward. That's when you start to put weight on the hands. And we're getting into the wrists, the hands, that whole area of the body. Some of you might be comfortable rocking back and forth. That could be a nice way to kind of put a little bit more weight, but just be gentle with yourself. Then find a comfortable position, maybe the hips back, so that you can bring the palms of the hands back down to the mat. Try turning the hands around. So you can do one hand at a time, maybe fingertips point toward the knees. If it works, you could do both hands at the same time. And if it doesn't, just do one hand at a time, that's fine too. And then circle the shoulders over the wrists. Keep the fingers spread. Keep pressing down into the whole hand, especially all 10 fingertips, circumference of the palm. If you have one hand going in the opposite direction, stop, switch the direction of the hand. So you have one hand going forward and the other hand going back, and then switch your direction of your circles. So whichever way you didn't go the first time. And you'll come back to center, turn the hands back around so fingertips are pointing toward the top of the mat. And then you'll come to seated. So cross-legged seat. You could sit up on a bolster if you like, if you want to prop up the hips, or a blanket. A block or two might be nice to have nearby if you have them. So just keep those nearby. I'm going to start with one block on the medium height out in front of me, and you can always adjust. Maybe you start there if you have the block. Tighten up the legs. So you want to cross at mid shin. Feet go forward, so they're not back by the hips, but they're up by the knees, toes pointing forward. And you can shift side to side a little bit so you feel even on the hips. And then from here, we'll get into the shoulders and the hips at the same time. So reach the arms forward, palms facing up. Bring the right arm on top of the left arm. And then maybe you just grab onto the tops of the shoulders. If there's enough space, you could bring the backs of the forearms together. That's deeper. Some of you might like to bring the fingers of the left hand inside the heel of the right hand. So eagle arms, some version, one of those 3 versions, and then you'll start to fold forward, coming into the hip opening, and you're finding an easy place to be. So the blocks there to rest the elbows, forearms on, if you feel like it's too low, then lift the block up or stack 2 blocks. That could be another option, stacking 2 blocks. I might do that. You'll come back into it. It's right arm on top of left arm. You can rest the elbows, let the head and the neck go. And this is a nice shoulder opening where you don't have to do too much work. And if the elbows are resting on something in your eagle arms, you'll feel that the shoulders move away from the ears naturally. The shoulder blades widen across the back. And the blocks give you access to stay in this shape longer. Less effort. Deepening the shoulder opening. You'll start to bring yourself back up, unwind the arms. As you sit back up, start to take some shoulder rolls. So the arms are loose, they're just dangling by the sides. All the effort's coming into the shoulders as you roll the shoulders in one direction. And then you'll switch, go the other way with your circles. See how that feels. Okay, and then if you have anything in front of you like blocks, set those off to the side. Remember which shin is in front. Bring the hands back behind you. Separate the feet wide. Move the knees side to side, coming into your windshield wipers to counter that hip opening. Then you'll come back to seated, other shin in front. So you're switching sides, lift the hips up a little bit, grab those blocks or whatever you're using. If you liked it, underneath, right in front of you. Then you'll reach the arms forward, left arm on top of right arm. Either grab the shoulder blades and just stay like this, or maybe the backs of the forearms come together. Maybe you bring those right fingers inside the heel of the left hand. So some version of eagle arms. And then when you feel ready, you can start to fold forward, adjusting the blocks. They might need to go higher or lower on this side. So don't feel like you have to keep it in the same place. You could also put the bolster on top of a stack of blocks too if you want more height. Start to settle in, find a place where you can be in the pose without thinking about it. You just want enough headspace so you can focus on your breath. Hopefully finding some sense of relaxation so that the hips can begin to open and the shoulders. Both get very tight and could always use a little extra love. Let's start to lift the head back up, unwind the arms, come back up to seated, and you'll start to move the shoulders, keeping the arms relaxed. They don't need to do any work. Just move the shoulders around, see what kind of space you made. Go the other way with your shoulder rolls. And if you have anything in front of you, set that off to the side. Bring the hands back behind you, lean back, feet wide, knees side to side. So we'll come into another hip opening, one that's similar to what we did in terms of the hip opening. So you'll use the bolster for this one. So two options, single pigeon, which I'll show you first, or you'll come on your back and do thread the needle. I'll actually show you thread the needle first because I'm already halfway there. So thread the needles on your back, cross the right ankle on top of the left thigh. Maybe you bring that left leg in and grab on to the left thigh or top of the shin, depending on how open you are. Head needs to be down on the mat. So if that's not happening, then just keep the left foot down. If single pigeon feels like a good option today and it's something that works well in your body, you'll take the bolster the wide way, about halfway, the halfway across the length of the mat. So bring the hands out in front of you. You'll take downward facing dog. It's the best transition. Lift the hips up and back. Once that happens, reach the right leg up and back. Bring that right shin ahead of the bolster. So you set that right foot down and then you shift the hips side to side, stretching that left leg back behind you. Chest is lifted, squeeze the outer hips in toward the midline, and then start to walk the hands forward. Use the blocks if you want to for support. They can be really nice underneath the hands, the head, forearms, chest. Check that out. And if you feel anything in that right knee, it's the front knee, then that's when you come back to downward facing dog. Come to seated, bring yourself down onto your back and take thread the needle. So that right knee needs to be totally quiet. And if you're leaning way over to the right and you can't even out on the hips, that's another good cue to come onto your back and cross the right ankle on top of the left thigh. And you'll get a deeper hip opening that way. So sometimes we can look like we're in this shape, but we're not getting as much out of it. And one more thing to look out for, that right knee, we want it to be outside of the torso. So to the right of the torso, that's where the hip opening happens. If that right knee's underneath the chest, another good reason to come on your back and take thread the needle, you'll get a deeper hip opening. You're not getting much of a hip opening at all if that right knee isn't outside of the torso. Let's lift the head up. If you're in downward facing dog, if you're on your back on thread the needle, set the props off to the side. If you're on your back, you can just bring the feet down to the mat. Tuck the left toes, lift the hips up, get that right leg back behind you, back to downward facing dog. Pedaling out the feet could be a nice way to counter and get some of the circulation back in that right leg. You could also just move that right leg around. Might be a little bit more effort, so see which one feels better. Usually one's calling to you. And back to downward facing dog, both feet on the mat, left leg lifts up and back. Send that left shin forward ahead of the bolster. Scoot the right leg back. Top of the foot comes down to the mat. You want the big toe on the right foot to point straight back. Try to square the hips. So that's a little bit of squeezing in of the outer hips in toward the midline. Chest will lift. And then you start to fold forward any amount that feels good. That's where the weight on the hip opening starts to happen. If you're on thread the needle, you're switching sides. Left ankle connects with the right thigh. Up to you if you keep the right foot down on the mat or if you bring the legs in closer, reaching through, grabbing the back of the right thigh or top of the shin. Just that left foot, the one that you can see, keep that one flexed to protect the left knee. You might find that single pigeon works on one side and not the other. That's fine. Don't feel like you have to do the same pose on each side. Thread the needle is always your option. And let's lift the head if you're in single pigeon, bring the hands underneath you, lifting the upper body, setting any props off to the side like blocks, tuck the back toes, lift the hips up, get the left foot back behind you, downward facing dog with some movement in that left leg, pedaling out the feet, or maybe moving the whole leg around, whatever felt good on the first side. If you're in thread the needle, both feet down on the mat, rest there. Left foot comes down to the mat. Slide that bolster off to the side. We're all coming to seated. So knees down to the mat, legs out in front of you, and the legs will just be stretched out in front of you straight. So have blocks, bolster nearby. We're doing a seated forward fold. We've been using the bolster a lot. Here's a good way to use the bolster. You can take it on top of the thighs the long way, bring the bolster all the way up against the abdomen. Then you can just start to fold forward in your seated forward fold. Blocks could be underneath the hands or the forearms as armrests. You could also put a block under on top of the bolster at whatever height makes the most sense. You can rest the head and then maybe the palms turn up. So that's another great use of the props. And you don't have to have any props for your seated forward fold. So if you don't like the bolster for whatever reason, you can just fold forward over the legs, rest the hands, or you could take a block between the legs down by the calves and maybe you stack them so you can rest the head down that way. So find a comfortable shape. Rounding of the back is fine here. Let the head be heavy wherever you are. And legs are relaxed. You don't need to push out through the soles of the feet. You've had the legs bent quite a bit for the last two hip opening poses, single pigeon and square. So now you just have them out in front of you, giving them some space to lengthen again. And let's start to make our way back up to seated. Take your time. If you have any props in front of you, set those to the side of the mat. And then you'll take the bolster, bring that back behind you. This time it'll be a pillow for your head. So the wide way, back behind you, soles of the feet to the mat. Make sure the blocks are near the hips. Come on down onto your back and then place the bolster so that it supports the head and the neck. So it's just resting on the tops of the shoulders. And then you'll take the blocks, the lowest height, the wide way, and bring those underneath the thighs. So open up the legs a little bit. And then once you extend the legs, thighs are lifted on the blocks. Knees are elevated too, but there's nothing underneath the knees. So blocks are just underneath the thighs. And then you can bring the arms down by the sides, close the eyes. This is our Shavasana today. So we started with the bolster all the way down at the feet, and we're closing with the bolster underneath the head. You can let go of that breath control. Now the body goes back to breathing on its own. Let's start to wiggle the fingers and the toes, finding some small movements in the body. Still staying in this relaxed state of mind, hanging on to some of this Shavasana. Walk the feet in, bending the knees, and you'll use the feet and the hands to just shift the blocks off to the side. You won't need them anymore, so set them off so they're out of the way. Feet are on the mat. And then roll over to your right side. See if you can keep the head on the pillow. Lying on your side, eyes closed. Using the left hand, bring yourself up to a comfortable seat on your mat. You're welcome to sit up on a prop if that's better. Finding a tall seat. So here's where you find that length in the spine. You've moved it in all directions. Back bends, twists, forward folds. It's awake. It's ready to go for your day. And it should be easier to find this posture than it would have been at the beginning of your practice. Bring the hands together in front of you. Keep the lift of the chest, hugging the core in as you slowly bow the head, taking a moment to yourself to honor and acknowledge your heart and your spirit. Touching base. And coming from this place as you honor everyone else around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thanks so much for joining in today. Hope you feel ready for the day or evening ahead. That was full body, but I think we focused more on the spine today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Thank you.